G'day.
All right. First question. Your work has always been about giving back to people, I've noticed. It seems as though you are generous in spirit and generous in everything that you do. Why do you think that is?
Because I think about, when you asked the question, I noticed your work is always about giving back. The first thing that came to mind was, actually, it hasn't always been about giving back, because as a kid, I was always about getting as much as I could. As a teenager, I was still working out where I fit in the world. And then as I became a world champion athlete, that's when things started to shift for me. So in the first, I'd say, let me start again. When you talk about giving back, I'd have to say my life hasn't always been driven to give back, but I've always been aware of my position in the world, if that makes sense. So when I think about as a kid, of course, we're narcissists. Everything's happening for us. I'm learning and drawing in as much knowledge as I can. When I became an adolescent, I'm still figuring it all out. And then when I became an adult and started winning world titles, I realized that my words had weight, my behaviors and my actions could be leveraged, either for me or against me. I became a role model without any indication or handbook as to how to deal with that responsibility. So then I had a choice. What impact do I want to make? And that choice is really what drives me today. Being able to make a positive impact on the world, whether it's through my charity work or through my work with Awake Academy or my work with you guys, it's all about what positive impact am I making on the planet, even when it comes to walking along the street and picking up a piece of plastic that I see in the gutter. You know, every one of us has a role to play in leaving this planet in a better place than where we found it.
And do you feel that you've had an increase in or more of a burden of responsibility as you become more responsible?
It's funny how you call it a burden of responsibility, because it can be perceived by others as a burden, and it can become perceived by ourselves as a burden, but I don't perceive it as a burden, I see it as a gift, because I take it very personally, and I don't put pressure on myself to fulfill a particular role. I have a really clear expectation of myself as to how I expect myself to behave. And I don't see it as a burden of responsibility. I see it as an opportunity to pave the way, to light the way.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so mental health as part of that.
Yes.
So obviously you've gone through a tremendous career, and it's come from, you know, a point of real resilience and toughness. So I admire greatly.
Thanks.
What role has mental health played in that, both positive and negative?
So I think about the early years in my career when I started competing, and I would refer to myself as a classic victim, where what I mean by that is it was everyone else's fault. Firstly, it was the conditions' fault. It was my board's fault. Then it was the judge's fault. Then it was my peers' fault. Then it was always somebody else's fault for my misgivings, for my disappointments, for my failures, which upon reflection now I realise were all learning opportunities. But because I didn't view them as that, I only viewed them as failures. So therefore I became a failure because my whole sense of self-worth was wrapped up in what I did. And in those years, it took a lot of resolve and a lot of reinforcement from external people that I had built trust and connection with to make me realise that I am at the centre of everything going on in my life. So I can choose to take responsibility, or I can choose to continue laying the blame on everybody else. And so when I reflect on that period, I think the mental health journey that I've been through, I was on this emotional roller coaster because of the way I think. Now I understand now that the way I think determined how I feel, and how I feel determined how I behaved. And my behaviours were so at times incongruent with who I thought I was that I never took responsibility for that behaviour, recognising that it was just an inconsistent thought pattern that created inconsistent behaviours. If I could start to actually become aware of the thoughts, which is Eckhart Tolle in a nutshell, right? You are not your thoughts, become the awareness behind them. When I became the awareness behind my thoughts, I went, oh, okay, so I'm triggered by those thoughts, but I actually don't have to behave in a way that I'm triggered. I can stop and say, how do I choose to respond to this situation? So in those early years, it took me 8 years to win a world title, and I was 8 years a victim.
Wow. Is that right?
Yeah.
And was there a moment there where you sort of realised that responsibility and the privilege of that, and that you do control your own destiny in a way?
Yes, and it took one of my great mentors, a guy called Tom Carroll, who's now a meditation teacher, and he helps people through a variety of different challenges, and he's been through his own pathway of trauma and challenge himself through drug addiction and all the other things that Tom's done. But he was one of my great teachers. He introduced me to meditation and yoga and just simple breathing exercises. It's just the capacity to choose to stop for just one moment and take one intentional breath can have a profound positive impact on the quality of our lives. But there's what I've learned, there's 3 things that determine our quality of life. Number 1 is the quality of choices you make. And if you're constantly unconscious and in a victimized mentality when you're laying the blame, then you'll quite often make choices that won't serve you, they'll sabotage you. Number 2, the quality of people you have around you. And Tom was one of those quality people who I refer to as my dream team. He was my accountability partner. And then number 3 is the quality of actions that you take. And Tom and people like Guy Leach and other coaches and mentors in my life have been able to basically put the mirror up in front of me and saying, excuse me, are the behaviours that you're demonstrating getting you closer to where you want to be, and are they congruent with who you want to be? So I had the choice to make from that.
Wow, and it sounds as though those mentors, those leaders, those people that come into your life made a profound difference on who you are, and you've gone on to win 7 world titles, but also you've done so much more post that. Talk to me about how important it is to surround yourself with positive people who can influence you in a way that you're going to get great outcomes for your life.
Really good question, because when I think about my mentors and my teachers and my guides, I had to first have the courage to listen. Because a lot of the time we may surround ourselves with people who are yes people. Yeah, Taz, you can do this. You're amazing. And I don't refer to them as honesty barometers. They're just yes people. Look, it's great to have champions and cheerleaders, but we also need people who are honest with us. And that's where I feel like I've been that's where I feel like I've been able to maintain that sense of groundedness and connection, is that I've had people in my life who hold me accountable, who are honest with me, who celebrate my success, who console me in my disappointments, but see the best in me and do their best to bring the best out in me. But I'm still responsible for those actions. Yeah. So those people that you have, and what I love to say is that the law of proximity states that we become the sum of the top 5 people we have around us. So if you're not aware of who you are, then have a look at the people that you have around you, and that'll give you a bit of an indication as to what kind of person you are. Surrounding yourself with positive people, I feel that we can become toxically positive. Yeah, and so all we're doing is pretending everything's all good all the time. And what I believe is that it's actually 100% okay not to be okay. And we have to give ourselves the time and the space to process and honour those emotions. So I really wish I was taught how to identify and process emotions as a child, because I would have been a much more efficient adult.
Because you're right, it's not always about the positive moments in your life. There are so many adversities that we challenge. And I know you've faced your own mental health challenges and gone through those, as we all do. How important is it to really be honest with yourself and dig into those moments where things aren't going well, where things are poor, and you are having negative experiences with yourself and other people? How important is it to really face those times?
The more you endure pain, the more you prolong the pain. So you and I have both been through moments of pain and suffering and trauma and setbacks and obstacles. That's the human existence. If we deny ourselves the feeling of that pain and suffering, we deny ourselves the healing and the growth that we will get once we come through that. So when we're focusing on the darkness and the pain, we're just prolonging the pain and the darkness. Yeah. And I am the first person to admit that that's what I did too. So when I had chronic fatigue syndrome, I just focused on being broken. I focused my attention on how fat or how lazy or how tired or how unsuccessful I am. And what we focus on expands. And then I just continued to focus on that darkness and then wondered why I became more of it. The power of manifestation. But sometimes we manifest what we don't want. And we wonder why. And it wasn't until I got to a place where I was really scared. I was in a state of fear because I started to have suicidal tendencies. I would wake up every day thinking of different ways to end my life. And for a woman who is naturally positive and outgoing, that was quite a disconcerting place to find myself. But I'd never taken the time to become aware of the fact that I was feeling that way. I was just focusing on just getting through the day, every day. And then when I started to become the awareness behind the thoughts of suicidal tendencies, I thought, that's not who I am. This is scary. That's not who I want to be. So what do I do now? Well, I had to first accept that I was having those thoughts. Second, accept responsibility for those thoughts. And then third, be courageous enough to put up my hand and go, I need help.
And can I ask about that? Because, you know, often people don't, they'll get through those first two steps, but that third step about putting up your hand and asking for help, 60% of Australians don't seek help for mental illness. Did you face a stigma back in those early days, or was that your own, internal stigma?
Yes.
Putting your hand up? And just talk to me about what you had to go through to really sort of, get that help that you needed.
Yeah, so the stigma is a really big point that people need to get over. Because there's no question that 1 in 4 Australians are going to have mental health issues. So if you're sitting in a room of 5 people, one of them in there is suffering. And I'm a silent sufferer. So the stigma for me comes from my childhood. So if I ever injured myself or made a mistake, I came from a place of tough love. Get over yourself, get on with it. I almost broke my neck surfing, lay down, rest, you'll be fine. I hit my knee jumping over a wall, swelled to twice its size. My friend came over, when you okay? My dad's like, get her a bloody wheelchair. So there was never any compassion. So if compassion is not role modeled by someone in your life, then you're not going to learn how to give yourself compassion. So that's why I was tagged as having the compassion of a tiger shark as an athlete, because I had zero compassion for me. So therefore I was never able to extend that to anyone else. You can't give what you don't have, and you can't receive what you won't allow yourself to learn. So it was really challenging for me to understand the importance of having self-compassion first, because that was never even a discussion. Anyway, after I found myself in that place of fear, scared, just uncertain, that's when I went, I can't do this alone. I need to have the courage to ask for help. And look, I must admit, I've had the courage to ask for help in many years prior to that. I think about reaching out to a world champion, asking for advice, reaching out to a personal trainer to get me healthier and fitter, reaching out to a nutritionist to help me with my diet. So I've reached out before. What's the difference in reaching out to someone else just because it's considered a mental health problem?
But was it harder? Was it more challenging?
It was more challenging because I endured the pain longer than I needed to endure it.
Held it longer.
Yeah. Because I was pretending that I have it all covered. I was pretending that it was all good. I was pretending that I've got this, I can get through this. And my life or the universe or whatever power you believe in was telling me, actually, no, you don't have this. Can you not see how much you're suffering? Can you not see how much pain you're enduring? Why? Because you're scared to let people know that you're weak? Well, actually, the biggest strength in our lives is vulnerability, because when you're vulnerable, you are in a state of whole acceptance. That's not weak, that's strength. That's fundamental strength. And when you've got that fundamental strength, that's when you can put your hand up. And the funny thing was, when I did raise my hand and pick up the phone and rang my girlfriend, who was Joanna Griggs, who was an Olympic swimmer, I rang her because I knew she'd been through it. Yeah. Now, Brené Brown says there's very few people in our lives that have earned the right to share in our pain and suffering, so we do have to be discerning about who we pick the phone up to. Pick it up to a professional, a mental health trained professional, or pick it up to a friend who you know is part of your dream team, who won't judge you, criticise you, or put you down. And her response when I said, I need help, her response was just gold. She said, what took you so long?
Really?
Yeah. And I just went, yeah, I know. She's like, all right, let's get going.
Let's get into it.
Let's get started. Because if you're not willing to listen and you're not willing to change, then it doesn't matter how much someone reaches out to support you. And that's where the empathy piece comes into it. You've got to be willing to sit with them and just allow them to create that time and space and have the courage to go. And it comes from a state of acceptance. Okay, I know I'm not well. I accept that I'm not well. And I'm now choosing to take steps towards getting well.
Yeah. Yeah, there'll be young people who are listening to this, and there'll be, especially the young people. So there's less of a stigma now about reaching out, but there's still very much, especially in regional areas within Australia.
Yeah.
Have you got any practical advice? I mean, you gave some great tidbits there about how to, put your hand up and ask for help. But consider a young person, say in regional Australia, who is probably stigmatised and doesn't want to talk about it. Any advice for that young person that's out in that country town right now that needs help?
Oh my goodness. Shit, that's a big one. The first thing that comes to mind when I think about kids, especially in rural areas where they're struggling with self-worth, for example, which is the one of the fundamental principles around the development of mental health challenges, is take the time to define who you are. Don't be defined by external circumstances. As Stephen Covey said in the book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it's actually our decisions, not our conditions, that determine the quality of our lives. And yet, as a kid, we're so invested in belonging that we will do anything to belong. And actually, that translates into adulthood as well. If we can find that one place or that one person or that one activity that gives us that sense of belonging, then we won't be so desperate to conform and belong in a way that could potentially either harm our lives or take our lives. I think about surfing for me. Sorry for the kids in the regional areas, no surf near you, but I think about how surfing for me has not only given me a life, it's saved my life. Because I think about the peer pressure that I grew up with on the northern beaches of Sydney. It's a very affluent society, but it's also got a lot of its own issues and challenges. And we're seeing an enormous amount of suicide in that area. Is that when I think about the peer pressure that I was subjected to, the one thing that prevented me from buying into all of that is I had a choice to make. Do I smoke? Do I do drugs? Do I stay out late? Do I drink too much? Or do I make sure I get to bed early because I want to get up and surf tomorrow and feel good? So that helped me make decisions that were right for me, not right for everybody else. Yeah. So when it comes to living in regional areas, find a passion, whatever that is. Could be milking cows, could be bushwalking, it could be cleaning up your local streets. Just find that passion that gives you a reason to get up and get moving, because we obviously understand the importance of exercise. It's the body's natural antidepressant. So we need to find a way to keep kids moving and invested in physical activity, but we also need to give them a reason to get up each day, find that momentum, because you might grow up in an environment where you're constantly told you're worthless, you're nothing, you've got nothing to look forward to, you're going to be stuck in this little country town for your whole life. It's really hard to see anything outside of that, but the only person that can dream is you. And the second piece of advice would be find somebody in your life that shares that dream and that helps you build that dream.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, wonderful advice. So this in a way has really led you to where you are today, which is a world champion. Very much post that and what that looks like, and of course you're starting to collaborate and work closely with the Black Dog Institute.
Yep.
How important is it for you to take a real leadership role, in our society, in Australian society, around mental health? Is that a responsibility that you feel?
It's a responsibility that I take wholeheartedly. Let me start again. The desire to talk about mental health is multifaceted from my perspective, because I think about not only the mental health issues that I've overcome, whether it's depression or suicidal tendencies or anxiety, but I also feel so compelled to share my stories because it helps people feel less alone. And as we know, mental health challenges are indiscriminate. You can be the best in the world at something and people will perceive me as having the best life in the world. No one sees the struggles, no one sees the pain, and I'm certainly not going to jump onto Instagram saying I'm depressed today. It's like it's not about gaslighting the world, saying, hey, I know I'm a world champion, but I'm depressed. It's actually about sharing the challenges with the intention to help people through their own. And that's what inspires me every day to get up. My personal why is to awakening others awakens me. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, because the more I share, the more I learn from others. And that's why I'm so excited to work with Black Dog, because there's so much I need to learn about how I can help people navigate their mental health journey, because whether it's good or bad, there's the way that I've navigated my way through it may not be right for you. And I want to be able to provide as many resources and tools and tips for people to help shortcut the struggle, which is what my online course does, to help people own their truth. We all have struggles, we all have challenges. So I'm really passionate about leading that mental health discussion, because yes, I'm a 7 times world champion, but I believe it's been my challenges and my setbacks and my mental health issues that have enabled me to become who I am today. And I'm really grateful for those challenges. Life's too short for guilt.
Yeah.
Life's too short for regret. The past is a valuable resource to go back and learn from, but your past doesn't have to be your future. And that's what I want to help people continue to do. And it's what I still practice. Like, I'm not professing or actually, I'm not preaching, I'm teaching. And that way I'm still learning.
And so to segue really nicely into the Awake Academy and all the wonderful work that you're doing, just talk to me a little bit about, before we get into what the Awake Academy does, just tell me about your transition from, 7 times world champion and coming out of that world into, helping people, and what that's been like. Because that must have required a whole new range of new skills and new ways of working, and a real belief in yourself that you could do this. What sort of made you move into this area? Was it always in you?
Apparently it was. Retirement moved me into this world, but I mean, you can't say retiring from professional surfing is what moved me into this world, because retirement from professional surfing literally was a transition into a whole new life. And I retired from the Pro Tour when I was 36, and so I was still a spring chicken and still had plenty of life to live and plenty of things to give. Back in 1997, I did a development course called Money and You, because I had believed I had a full block in relation to money, because I couldn't seem to manifest any of it. I was number 2 in the world, still earning 20 grand a year, working 4 different jobs, going, where's the block here? Let's go and do a Money and You course. But I had to write a letter to myself about what my life would look like in 5 years. So this is 1997. So I had to project to 2001 or 2002 and work out where would my life be. And literally, I found that story or that note to myself several years later when I was cleaning out my office, and I had manifested all of it.
Really?
Yeah, even the colour of the car, the style of the car, where I was living, the amount. I said I was going to be a multiple world champion, but where I'm going with this story is that I even wrote that I was going to become a motivational speaker. And I didn't realise that I had that passion. I knew I was a storyteller, and I love to tell stories. And that's what helped me tell the story of winning for so many years, but in so many different ways, because there's nothing more boring than someone dominating the world tour, coming from a 6-time consecutive world champion, and then a journalist coming up to me going, so how does it feel?
Yeah.
Not that good.
Yeah.
Don't achieve your dreams, it's not worth it. I mean, what am I supposed to say? Yeah. Seriously. So I had to wrap story around what I was doing to keep myself interested. So I wanted to become a motivational speaker to inspire people to achieve their dreams. Yeah. And so I had to learn how I did that myself. Fast forward 15 years of being on stage, post-professional surfing, or 12 years of being on stage, I realised I was teaching and preaching about living a sustainable life and achieving sustained success, and yet the way in which I was going about it was unsustainable. Yeah. I was on the road 180 days a year. I was surfing less now than I wanted to surf. I was unhealthy. I was dealing with health challenges, and it wasn't sustainable. And then my business partner, Tess, in Awake Academy, basically helped me do a stock take on my life and said, okay, let's have a look at where you're at and where you want to be. So where's the gap? And I said, well, the gap is me and my choices. Yeah. So, and I think about, very quickly, those first 5 years of transition. It took me 4 to 5 years to transition from professional surfing to committing to doing something different. And this seems to be a common theme in athletes, yeah? Well, actually, if I asked John Howard, how long did it take for you to transition out of politics? And he said 4 years. Huh. So it's not just athletes. We all take time to embrace the new, whatever that is. but we have to create it ourselves.
And is failure a part of that?
Absolutely. Failure is a very necessary part of that.
Yeah.
But it's only a failure if you deem it to be.
Yeah.
I see it all as a learning experience.
Yeah.
I don't judge it as failures anymore because I'm also aware that if I judge it as failure, I can be so triggered by that I'll wrap my self-worth around that and go, I am a failure.
Yeah.
And another lesson that I've learned from Brene Brown is the fine line between guilt and shame is guilt, I did something bad, shame, I am bad. So when it comes to failure is I learned something. The guilt is, I can't believe I did that. But the shame is, I am a failure. So it's a fine mindset shift, but it's been a really powerful tool for me just to stop and go, okay, I can choose to define myself by that, or I can choose to learn from that. Yeah. So when I think about those 4 or 5 years, I ebbed and flowed. You know, some days I was okay with it. Some days I had this, what I refer to as a relevance deprivation. You know, I started to think about what the tool was and how it must miss me and how women's surfing needs me. And, you know, I was convinced that's where I needed to go. And Tess actually reinforced the message that I am so much more than that. And that's why now I'm more about talking about mental health and applying the life lessons that I've learned from being not only a professional athlete, but a motivational speaker and a businesswoman, both successful and unsuccessful in business, and distilling that into a course or a platform that people can now self-empower.
What's its purpose? What's the problem you're trying to solve at Ego Academy?
Well, we want to cultivate connection, growth and happiness in humanity. That's our number one mission in life. And as we all know, having bold missions is what gets us out it every day. But our purpose is to make people feel more centered, connected and confident. Mm-hmm. And we're achieving that.
Fantastic. Yeah. And so you've obviously gone from sort of more of the motivational sort of speaking and as you say, that is highly resource intensive. You're out on the road yourself, you're the only one that can do it, to much more of a scalable sort of product now.
Yes.
So you're solving that problem as you described, and you're also looking to do that more in the corporate world now, I understand.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're getting incredible results from the corporate market. I mean, ideally I wanted to create this more of like an online digital version of me so I can spend more time surfing and more time traveling and more time with my husband, but it's become really successful.
Funny that.
I know. Look, we teach what we need to learn, and part of the course is all about establishing clear boundaries and some decision-making frameworks that I've learned in my post my surfing career, I have to apply to my own life to ensure that I'm still nurturing my own health and well-being and mental health and creating that space for me to be able to be the best that I can be. So these tools are not just one-offs that you just learn and go, oh yeah, that sounds good, and then throw it away. This is a toolkit that I keep coming back to myself. Like during COVID, for example, I had to give myself mental health days. I just wasn't feeling good. And I know all the resources, whether it's gratitude and journaling and immersing myself in nature and moving my body, none of that worked. So I thought, what advice can I give to myself? What advice would I give to someone who's feeling this way? Yeah. Go do the work, which means having the courage to look within, which means having the compassion to sit with that and honor that. And it also means then having the commitment to do the work, to actually lean in and do something about it, because otherwise it's your fault and you know, we start laying the blame and we become a victim of our circumstances. So I went back to my office and I opened up my workbook and I went to page 1, and it's identify, connect and express your feelings through drawing. Yeah. And so I started drawing how I felt, and it was quite a really distressing drawing. But I felt liberated by it. I was like, oh, I feel much better now. So then I went surfing. Felt 100% better after that.
It must be enormously gratifying to go through your career and then come out into this Awake Academy and really build something that's pivotal, that's really changing people's lives. How satisfying is that for you?
It's extremely satisfying, extremely rewarding. And look, we spoke earlier about making sure that you have the right people around you. This would not have happened without my business partner, without Tess, without her. Not only her intellect and her skill set, but just her passion and commitment and work ethic to get the job done. And we're a dynamic duo, and and I openly admit that this may have my name to it, but it certainly wouldn't exist without Tessa's involvement, because it's something that we're both very passionate about and that we love to do every day. It's, they talk about having the job that you love, you'll never work a day in your life, but I disagree. We work really hard, but it's still a job that we love to do. And it's having dramatic impact, much greater than I ever expected it to have. Women coming up to us and men coming up to us saying, I've worked with therapists for 12 to 15 years and I got more out of this one day than I've done with 15 years in therapy. Wow. So that reinforces the importance of having these discussions, the importance of creating the time and the space and the material and the resources to support people through their journey. Because as I said, what worked for me may not work for you. But the great thing about Own Your Truth and the Whole Awake Academy platform is it's all about self-empowerment. It's self-customized. It's individualized. It's not, here is how I did it, here is how I did it, here is how you must do it. This is the resource, make it your own.
Yep. And
make it work for you. And keep coming back to it. Keep being willing to do the work, because the only sign of life is growth.
Yeah. The only sign of life is growth. I love that saying. Just a couple more small questions. When you're incredibly self-aware, so
yeah.
you obviously can follow your thoughts and think when they start to become negative or positive and move in that space.
Yeah, well, sometimes. I went into 10 days of depression recently. It's taken me a while to come out of that one, but yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And was there something significant that brought that on?
It was a social media trigger.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You read online and it spiked you.
It spiked me, and then it created a story that I wasn't willing to own. So then the story got louder and bigger and prouder and all-consuming and very dark. And then I became so stigmatized by the futility and the stupidity of the story that I didn't want to share this story with anybody. So then I just stayed stuck in the story, which then made me more numb and more dark and more depressed. And then it was my husband one afternoon and said, "Are you okay?" And I went, "No." And I didn't even have the strength to say, "Yeah, I'm fine." Yeah. I was that just dissolved and dark and numb. Yeah. Didn't want to be seen. Didn't want to be spoken to.
And what did you do next?
Well, I owned the fact, no, I'm not okay. And then he asked, "Do you want to speak about it?" Yeah. And so I felt safe. Yeah. And that's where we need to create. They're the environments we need to create. First, having the trust to speak, and secondly, having the safety to hold the space. So he held the space for me. He kept asking me, "Are you okay?" And he kept reaching out, and it took me a few days to get through it. Yeah. But I wasn't criticised. I wasn't ridiculed. Now I look back and think about just how. Look, I'm not even going to call it silly or stupid or any of those things. I just look at it and go, "Wow, what a really valuable life lesson." Yeah. About how easy it is to be triggered by something as insignificant as a story that I've created in my own mind, because it's not even true. Yeah. But
it's often all about the perception, isn't it?
It's all about the perception,
especially when you're experiencing mental ill health and you're predisposed to it, like as I am with anxiety. It does overtake you faster than you think.
It does, doesn't it?
Next thing you know, you're in a place where you wouldn't normally be, much faster than you thought you would get there.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that my dad's got dementia, and I've been his primary carer, and my older brother and my younger sister are all leaning in to help prolong his quality of life and help him stay at home for as long as he possibly can. And caring for someone with dementia has given me almost like a dichotomy of life, because I see how finite and how fragile life is, but then I also see the futility of it. And we can get so swept up and absorbed by insignificant things in our lives that really at the end of the day mean nothing, because we get to choose. And so we can choose to focus our attention on the things that bring us life, that energize us, that lift us up, that add value, that support and nurture and grow, or we can continue to look at the weeds and just, burrow around in the weeds and wonder why nothing's growing. And I must admit, sometimes I can get so stuck in the futility of the weeds that I start feeling depressed. And I've been noticing that my behaviour hasn't been the effervescence that I'm used to. And so I stopped and I went, what's causing this? And I realised I was focusing more on the darkness and the weeds and the sadness And I thought, well, what can I do? And I actually just went back to meditating.
Yeah, right.
Because it's funny, when we're busy, when we're overwhelmed, when we're doing things that distract us, we stray away from the little things that actually enable us to do that successfully.
Yeah.
And I'd just stopped my meditating practice.
And it sounds as though that's a fairly routine,
10 minutes a day.
10 minutes a day.
Daily Calm.
Right.
It's one of my favourite.
Yep.
Or Tess loves sending me different
Yeah.
meditations. But just through committing to 10 minutes of meditation for the last 2 days has literally transformed my perspective on my own life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which leads me sort of almost to my last question, which is...
But then I think about how long have I been meditating to notice that transition?
Right.
Because some people are like, I'm just going to go meditate for 10 minutes. And I'm going to be shifted.
Yeah.
It's like I started meditating back when I was 25. So I've been meditating for 25 years, on and off. So now, like you said, I am hyper self-aware. I've got to be aware of how I'm feeling to then understand how a certain activity or choice has shifted that that feeling.
Yeah.
So-
And it's incredible to see the evidence behind mindfulness and the effect that it has. 25 years ago, people, if you're meditating, it would have been, what are you doing that for?
Yeah,
Now
you hippie.
You hippie. Go sit in your tent.
Yeah.
It's much more practical now, isn't it? And
Yeah.
far more accepted. And
Far more.
Are you seeing the conversation around mental health being much more acceptable and talked about within your circles? And that when you say, I'm not doing so well, or this person's not doing so well, or just that general conversation, are you seeing greater awareness and capacity to talk about it?
I'm seeing a greater capacity and awareness. I'm still not seeing the acceptance I
Okay.
would like to see around
right?
it. Yes.
And define what you mean by that acceptance.
What
does
I
acceptance look like?
what I mean by acceptance is going deeper than just saying,
You're right.
yeah, you're okay. You're going to be all right?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm fine. You want to talk about it? Maybe later. So, okay, I'm recognising I've got a problem, but I'm not really willing to accept that I have a problem. I would like to see a greater level of acceptance. What I love about the whole mental health, the current discussion around mental health, is the fact is we're having the discussion. Because back when I had my greatest mental health issues, which was in my mid-20s, there was no Black Dog Institute. There was no resource for me. Fortunately, I had the wherewithal to, or at least the know to reach out and ask for help from someone who I trusted and respected and who I know trusted and respected me. When I think about the current challenge that we're facing, the beauty is we have a multitude of platforms for people to reach out to. So there's not one size fits all way to deal with it, and there's not one size fits all approach to it, which gives people the benefit of opportunity to explore what does work for them. I feel people need to have more compassion and empathy for people because we're so quick to judge. We judge what we don't understand. We fear what we don't know. We want to put this story, we want to wrap meaning and bias around it. So if you're having an issue that I feel uncomfortable with, I will judge you to prevent myself from being uncomfortable. We need to learn how to sit more in discomfort. And if we can sit in our own discomfort, that builds our capacity to sit in other people's discomfort.
Which leads me beautifully to the last question I want to ask, which is, are there any practical tips, any practical advice for someone to look after their positive mental health and make sure they stay well?
3 really simple things. Firstly, do something you love every day.
Love that.
Yeah, and have an all or something mentality about that. Because I love to surf, but I don't always have the time to do that. So my something is going down and jumping in the water for 5 minutes. At least I'm immersing myself in the ocean because that literally is the activity. It's not, I mean, I love surfing and I love, doing maneuvers that make me feel stoked and all those things. I get that little feeling of, I've still got it. But I also just love the connection with Mother Nature and detaching from everything, distraction, and just immersing myself in that. So that's the first thing, is doing something that you love every day. Actually, maybe the precursor to that is identify what do you love to do. You may have never even taken the time to define that. And if you can't think about things that you love to do now, go back to your childhood and reflect on activities that you love to do as a kid. I used to love colouring in.
Huh.
So I love doing that on days when I'm feeling overwhelmed or distracted. It's a real mindfulness activity, very grounding, very centering, connects me with that moment. So, I mean, that's 3 things in one, really, isn't it? Identify what you love to do and make the time to do it. Number 2, when it comes to building your positive health, is make positive choices. And one of those choices is to hydrate your body, just with water. Hydration has a profound effect on our bodies and our minds. You know, being 2% dehydrated can cause all sorts of problems and issues, and cognitive function and heart attacks, and like all sorts of things can happen. So just hydrate your body. Find yourself a water bottle that sparks joy.
Yeah.
Grab some water, just drink it, but hydrate your body. And then I think we need to go back to community and talk about the people that we have around us. Find your dream team. Find the people that bring the best out in you, that celebrate you, that have earned the right to share in your pain and suffering. The people that are honest with you, that challenge you. Not the yes people, but the people who see you for who you are and hold you accountable. The people who see you for who you are and hold you accountable for being that person every day.
And can I add a potential 4th one?
Yes, please do.
Only because this
You're
is,
the expert in this.
This is from you.
Yeah.
When you did our skydive last year, and just as I don't know if you remember, just as the CEOs were getting into the van, there were a couple that were really nervous.
Yes.
And they were visibly, shaking and nervous.
Mm.
And you said to me, "Do you mind if I say a couple of words?" And
Yeah.
I said, of course, go for it.
Yeah.
And you talked about control what you can, looking after what you can control.
Yes.
What you can't control, letting go of that.
Yeah.
Now, I recently did the skydive, and your words were embedded, burned in my brain as I'm petrified of heights. And as the plane was going up, and I was really freaking out, having pretty much a panic attack. I had your words in my mouth, which were, I can't control the harness, I can't control the fellow behind me, I can't control the plane, but I can control my breathing, and I can control the way that I enter this space and I go about this. And I was able to do it. How important is it to control what you can control and let go of what you can't?
Well, first thing is to recognize what can you control. When it comes to our own being, I can control how I think, how I feel, how I breathe, how I behave, how I respond, but it all comes back to the simple act of breathing. And that seems to be the common denominator in all of our lives. We take it for granted, but if you notice when you're stressed and anxious, what's your breathing like? Yeah, short, sharp, shallow. There's nothing rejuvenating in that. So how do you want to feel? If you want to feel a little calmer and more in control, then what kind of breathing do you need to do? Deeper, more intentional, down into the belly kind of breathing. So that's probably the 3rd one that we really need to focus on, actually. That can be the first one. How do you positively enhance your mental health? Do a breathing exercise once a day. Yeah. And intentional breathing exercise, because recognizing what you can control versus what you can't control. Look, everything outside of us, we can't control. Learn to accept that. You're on a good pathway to positive mental health.
Oh, fantastic. Lane, I didn't ask any questions. I love spending that time with you, and thank you so much.
You too. Thanks, Taz.